We have 16 games on the docket for week number 3, and in today's video, I'm going to go through every single matchup from Thursday Night Football all the way up until Monday Night Football and tell you guys whether I would start or sit the wide receivers in every single game, as well as give you guys my opinion on how they will finish by the end of the week. Before we get into things, though, I would like to ask that if you are new to the channel and you don't enjoy today's video, that you make sure to hit that subscribe button down below, like it owes you some money. So without further ado, let's get to my week number 3 wide receiver start or sit decisions for the 2025 fantasy football season. We begin with Thursday Night Football. The Miami Dolphins at the no one circles the wagons like the Buffalo Bills. Last time we saw Tyreek Hill, we saw the version that we knew and loved from 2023. 6 receptions on 7 targets for 109 yards. He had a deep ball catch from Tua in that game as well. Tyreek did struggle up against the Buffalo Bills last season. In 2023, he had one top 10 game at the wide receiver position and one game where he didn't play too well. The Bills defense got plowed in week number 1 by Zay Flowers, and the Baltimore Ravens last week, the Jets weren't as lucky. They really couldn't move the ball at all. The Dolphins on paper should be down big in this game. They are 12.5-point underdogs currently, so they're gonna have to throw the ball a lot late in that game. So Tyreek should be able to get his fair share of the Tua F it Tyreek Hill out there somewhere throws, so he could end up potentially finishing as a top 5 wide receiver on the week. Ultimately, though, he's just a low-end wide receiver 2 for me on the week, but a majority of you guys that have him will have him in your lineup. Jaylen Waddle away, Waddle has been dealing with a shoulder injury and was limited in practice on Tuesday. I would assume that he does play, though, but that is a situation that you're going to want to follow if you do decide to play him. Just like Tyreek, Jaylen Waddle woke up last week going 5 of 6 for 68 yards and a touchdown as the wide receiver 14. I fully expect the Dolphins to get scored on heavily in this game and them to be having to throw the ball super late on in the game, which does make Waddle startable. He is not the same range of wide receiver that Tyreek Hill is. He is more of a low-end wide receiver 3. I just would feel safer like about 90% of the time with Tyreek compared to Jaylen Waddle. So I definitely would rather, if I had both of them, you would definitely lean with Tyreek Hill. Malik Washington has been banged up with a thumb injury. He had that sick punt return touchdown that was instantly canceled out by the fact that Gibson returned the next kick for a touchdown. It's crazy just how quick that euphoria went away from me. I felt so good. I stood up. I did the fucking jerk off emote on my television. I said, ha ha ha, we're gonna beat the Patriots. And then, of course, I get kicked directly in the teeth. Malik is an interesting piece for the Dolphins' future, but in your redraft league, he is not start worthy or rosterable. For the Buffalo Bills, despite the Bills hitting the Jets from the back last week, the passing attack didn't end up putting up great fantasy points as a whole. Shakir, Coleman, and Palmer all drank an invisibility potion from Minecraft prior to the game because you could not see him John Cena style. Keon Coleman appears to be the wide receiver 1 on this offense, as that is what the opinions of the reporters was prior to the season, and that's also what we saw in week number 1. Coleman leads the team in targets, receptions, and receiving yards, as well as receiving touchdowns. Out of the wide receiver group, the Dolphins defense as a whole is just bottom of the barrel, so I do expect Keon Coleman to have a solid showing. There is risk, though, because this could just be a game where the Dolphins are getting elbow dropped, and James Cook as well as Josh Allen just run in a million touchdowns because the Dolphins' run defense is also soft as baby shit, so but end up not really loving Keon Coleman, so he is startable. He's in the low-end wide receiver 3 to high-end wide receiver 4 conversation. Khalil Shakir is the AFC East Wan'Dale Robinson. He will get his targets and receptions and score like 10 to 13 points. He isn't a big touchdown threat, so his upside is kind of limited, especially with Keon Coleman seemingly becoming the lead wide receiver on the team. I am not interested in Shakir this week, but if you need to start him, there are definitely far worse options. Now, I am a Joshua Palmer enjoyer, a Joshua Palmer truther, and always will be, and I hope he can keep climbing his way up the target hierarchy of this offense, but as of right now, he is not startable. Next up, we got the Green Bay Packers at the Cleveland Browns. A whole lot of red, like that album from Playboi Carti here. Sunday, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Now, the game has the lowest projected total on the week at 41.5. This kind of just feels like the kind of matchup where the Packers cruise to victory and they aren't throwing the ball all over the yard to win the game. Kind of like how the Bills just performed up against the Jets. It's an easy win. It's a layup, but there was really no value out of Josh Allen or the wide receivers. Sure, if any of the wide receivers in this game score and have a solid game, it would be Romeo Doubs, but it just doesn't really seem like the kind of game where you need to roll them out. Once Golden as well as Jordan Love get on the same page, I think things are going to be great for Matthew Golden down the stretch of the season. Had Love have hit Golden accurately last week, then he probably would have had a very big game. Now entering into the third game of Golden's career, I am hopeful that things are going to start to go his way. I'm hopeful that the engine is going to start up for Matthew Golden, but ultimately I don't really want to experiment that in this matchup where I think that you're just going to see a whole lot of running out the Packers. If I am not starting Doubs or Golden, we certainly aren't starting Dontavion John Wicks. Now the Browns offense as a whole was limp dick in Baltimore last week. Joe Flacco looked significantly worse, in my opinion, when you compare week 1 to week number 2. And now they are facing what might be the best defense in the NFL. Sure, they will probably be down all game long and they will have to throw the football. And while that is a positive for the weapons in Miami, in Cleveland, these guys may just not be open at all, and Flacco might struggle to find an opening in the defense to throw the ball to. So while Judy and Tillman have been seeing a healthy dosage of targets weekly, and while I think they are startable assets in other lineups, up against the Packers defense, I am just not willing to roll the dice on any of them. Next up, we move to the Indianapolis Colts. This is our Colts. This is our team. We bleed blue at the Tennessee Titans. Now, Michael Pittman Jr. had the Dolphins defensive backs' ankles behind their ears in week number 1 as the wide receiver 8, and he followed that up as the wide receiver 64 up against the Broncos in week 2. Now, a lot of people were telling me, Nick, how can you not start Michael Pittman after what he did up against the Dolphins? The answer was simple. He was going up against Patrick Surtain and the Denver Broncos defense. So I said, you know what? Pump the brakes. It's an obvious fall off, and that is exactly what happens. This week, he faces a much easier matchup that just had Adams and Puka Nacua Eiffel Tower them last week. So the Titans allow the 6th most points on a per-game basis to wide receivers, so I feel like the bounce back is coming for Pittman as a mid-range wide receiver 3. Now, Josh Downs did see some spark last week with 6 receptions on 8 targets for 51 yards. He is coming off that left hamstring injury from mid-August, so his potential rise to becoming the wide receiver 1 on this offense may take some time. Even in a great matchup here, he just doesn't quite crack the start-worthy range. Alec Pierce does appear to be the wide receiver 3 here, and even with Danny Dimes looking mighty fine, no way I'm going to be starting Alec Pierce. Calvin Ridley has been a disgrace to me and everyone that was a believer in the summer. In reality, he is really just struggling because Cam Ward is going through the motions as a rookie. He is the clear wide receiver 1 on this offense, and eventually, I do believe that Ridley is going to start putting up some big games once Ward starts playing better. This is a mid-tier matchup, so I think this easily could be the coming out party for Ridley. With that said, though, there are so many other wide receivers that are just more startable than Ridley. If you want to take the shot, go ahead, because I do believe Ridley will eventually be a very valuable asset for fantasy football teams. But as of right now, I am kind of in the scenario where I just want to see it before I roll him out there as a start. Alec Iomanor found the end zone last week up against the Rams on that crazy cross-body toss from Cam Ward. I think Iomanor is worthy of a roster spot. And again, once Ward figures things out, I think this offense could be humming, especially when the rushing attack gets a little bit better. But as of right now, the smart move is just to leave him stashed on your bench. Tyler Lockett in my pocket. Skirt! Tyler Lockett is basically that old lady that wants chocolate from that SpongeBob episode. The man has recorded 2 catches through 2 games for 9 total yards. This man shouldn't even be rostered if you're in a 32-team league. Next up, we got the Cincinnati Bengals at the cold like Minnesota Vikings. Now, before we break down this game at the wide receiver position in depth and the rest of the games on the slate for week number 3, I would like to give you guys a quick word for our friends, our partner over at Underdog. If you're brand new to Underdog and sign up using promo code Notorious or by clicking on the link in the video description, you will get a free pick plus a first-time deposit offer of up to $1,000 in bonus funds, as well as if you play $5 in the pick'em, you will get $50 in bonus funds. How pick'em works is incredibly simple. You pick at least 2 players, they're higher or they're lower, and if both those picks hit, you get paid. If you do multiple other picks, then all the picks have to hit and the payout will be higher. Make sure you guys do check that out. Promo code Notorious. Or by clicking on the link in the video description, they have a website as well as an app. Now, Jake Browning being the starting quarterback with Burrow hurt with turf toe has me not feeling nicey. Shout out John Gruden. It has me feeling disgusting. It has me feeling like there's just butterflies in my stomach. There are 2 ways to spin zone this situation. The first way would be 128 of 165 of Ja'Marr Chase's yards last week against the Jaguars came from Jake Browning. 53% of Browning's passing yards went to Ja'Marr Chase, and that Chase had a 34.4% target share for Browning. All of these stats came from Jeff Mueller on Twitter. Then there is the opposite argument, which is, hey, sound the alarms. DEFCON 1. Back in 2023, from weeks 12 through 18, he averaged 5 receptions a game with Jake Browning, 63 yards a game, and 1 total touchdown. I will choose to try to be as positive as possible, right? But a 1-game sample size of Jake Brown playing really good up against the fucking Jaguars isn't necessarily going to mean that Ja'Marr Chase is going to be fine, everything's okay. You know, you're definitely not sitting Ja'Marr Chase, right? You drafted him number 1 overall. The number 1 overall curse might have bitten us in the ass here again. Ja'Marr Chase didn't get hurt, knock on wood, but his quarterback did. I still got him as a top 12 wide receiver, and you just got to kind of hope that it's all going to work out. When Burrow was down for the count in 2023, we actually saw Higgins be the more viable wide receiver. Deep down, I hope that Jameis gets traded here, and both Chase and Higgins are going to be able to smash in that scenario. I love Higgins, but it could end up being Jover for him. I got him as a high-end wide receiver 3, but this shit just feels disgusting. Andre Yoshi-Vaz played 84% of the snaps and is clearly the wide receiver 3 on the team based upon the snap share through the first 2 games of the season. He wasn't startable with Joe Burrow, so you're definitely not going to be rolling him out there with Jake Browning. For the Vikings, Jay Jettis' season may be rolled up in a spliff and smoked by the quarterback position in Minnesota. Carson Wentz reeks a stink that can only be smelled in your local sewer when you go to hang out with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. JJ McCarthy was holding him back as well. He will be fine and serviceable, but you know damn well they're just going to spam to run the ball at a really high rate, and that is going to ice Justin Jefferson out. The matchup here is good. The matchup here is beautiful. The matchup here is fantastic. So I can't rank him lower than a top 12 wide receiver, but man, oh man, am I scary. And if he was the wide receiver 37 at the end of the week, I don't think anyone would be surprised. Now, maybe Wentz and Thielen have an old guy connection that we've never seen before, and maybe they have some old people telepathy, but with how much this offense is going to run the ball, there's no need to play any non-Justin Jefferson wide receiver here. Just 4 total targets through the first 2 games. I don't expect Carson Wentz to be the savior. Jalen Nailor, I barely knew her, may actually be the wide receiver 2 over Thielen, but again, none of this even fucking matters with Wentz under center. Next up, we got game number 5, the Pittsburgh Steelers at the New England Deflatriots. Now, for the Patriots, Kayshon Boutte led the team in snaps in back-to-back weeks at the wide receiver position, which led to 1 target on 1 reception for 16 yards and a touchdown up against the Dolphins. Boutte was butt booty naked, wide open, and scored that touchdown. The Steelers defense is straight up ass compared to what we would have expected coming into the season. So if you play Boutte, go right ahead and do it. But in my opinion, this offense just seems a little bit too spread out right now with no definitive number 1 target. And I wouldn't be surprised if Diggs quickly rises up the rankings. Now, he saw a snap uptick from week 1 to week 2, but he is still yet to play a significant amount of snaps. He is coming off of an injury that obviously ended his season last year in Houston, so his time to shine will come. He will eventually become the wide receiver 1, but right now he just doesn't play enough to become startable. DeMario time! Despite Demario Douglas getting so much hype in the summer, that hype has not remotely transferred onto the football field. 8 targets with 3 catches on the season for 6 yards and a touchdown, not playing him or rostering him. For the Pittsburgh Steelers, last week, I was spewing the revenge game narrative for Metcalf up against the Seahawks, and he did get that revenge touchdown, but it wasn't necessarily the sweet, sweet victory we would have expected for Metcalf. 3 of 6 for 20 yards and a tug week 1. 1, he did look better. He is still the clear number 1 on the team, and the Patriots defense has been far from advertised with Vrabel. Gonzalez has missed back-to-back games, so if he misses, this is definitely a better spot for Metcalf. If you play him, you're going to feel okay about it, right? He's eventually going to bring the boom. Shout out to the Costco guys. He's eventually going to have that big game, so he is a mid-range wide receiver 2 for me. With Aaron Rodgers turning back into the Jets version of himself last week, Calvin Austin scored just 3 fantasy points. When Rodgers locks in and reclaims his former glory, then Austin will have some solid showings. And while that is entirely possible up against this not-so-hot Patriots defense, I would rather just not start him because there's really no point in playing the guessing game. Again, in week number 3, with not a crazy amount of injuries and no one on bye, you don't need to be playing Calvin Austin. Roman Wilson played the 3rd most snaps last week. Seemed like Ben Skoranek was the wide receiver 3 in week number 1. Who really gives a shit? We're not playing Aaron Rodgers, wide receiver number 3 at this point. Next up, we got the LA Rams at the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, Puka Nacua has came out the gate of this season on fire like he got a Molotov cocktail thrown on him in CSGO. Back-to-back top 6 finishes, topping 23 plus points in each showing this week against the Eagles is going to be his toughest test yet, and could be a matchup where he's on the struggle bus, based upon the fact that every other matchup after this, up until the bye in week number 8, does feel very good for Puka. But, and there's a big but, shout out to Sofia Vergara, he played great in both matchups against the Eagles last year. 9 receptions on 13 targets for 117 yards in November, and 6 receptions on 14 targets for 97 yards against them in the divisional round of the playoffs in that snow game. Puka may be the Eagles' kryptonite, so you got to be starting him with supreme confidence as a top 8 option. For Davante Adams, all summer long, I was banging the drum for Puka and Davante Adams, and last week was exactly why. Adams was the wide receiver 9 with 6 receptions on 13 targets for 106 yards and a touchdown. Again, this is a tough spot for Adams, but ultimately, this should be a higher scoring game, and in any given game, Adams can do exactly what he did last week, going for over 100 yards and a touchdown. He is a low-end wide receiver 1 to a high-end wide receiver 2 for me on the week. Now, Tutu Atwell has just 2 targets on the season. With Adams downtown and Puka there, there's no need to even roster him. For the Philadelphia Eagles, A.J. Brown has been dust through the first 2 games of the season. It is almost like there was a good-looking guy on the internet named Nick who told you not to draft him because of how this offense operates. Now, again, I'm not going to victory lap because I'm wrong about shit all the time. No one's going to be 100% correct. If you drafted A.J. Brown in the early rounds of your draft, deep down, you should have known that this was a possibility. And, you know, the team loves to run the ball, and A.J. Brown has been on a missing poster at the town square for the start off of the season. Now, he's had 5 receptions on 8 targets last week for 27 yards in Kansas City. The offense is just so good that they don't even have to throw the ball a ton. Now, this matchup may be the one where they have to, you know, let it fly. Shout out to Chris Smoove, right? Where they have to throw the ball a ton late on in the game. They're in a firefight, and that could lead to A.J. Brown having a big game. Last year in the regular season, 6 of 7 for 109 yards and a touchdown. The postseason, 2 of 7 for 14 yards. With Brown on the struggle bus, you know Hurts is going to feed him so he doesn't fucking crash out and start reading a book again on the sideline. But this was also the case last week where he was the wide receiver 67. 6'7". You can't sit A.J. Brown, but as of right now, I got him in the low-end wide receiver 2 range. Maybe demote him to your flex to teach him a lesson. Make him wake up, you know, show him that you are displeased with his fantasy production. Just like A.J. Brown, I was fading Devontae Smith all summer, and so far that has paid off. Back-to-back showings outside the top 50. One of these days he's going to pop off, though, but based on how things have been going, I do feel awful about having to roll him out there. He cannot be ranked inside the top 24. He's a mid-range wide receiver 3 at this point. Jahan Dotson caught this big pass in week 1 up against the Cowboys, and followed that up with just 1 catch up against the Chiefs as a whole. With such a run-heavy offense, you can't be starting the wide receiver 3. There is no need to roster Jahan Dotson. Next up, we move to the New York Jumbo Jets at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Justin Fields suffered a concussion last week up against the Bills in a matchup where he looked atrocious. Now, I think the offense would operate with Fields, better than they will with Tyrod Taylor. I don't think it takes a rocket scientist to figure that out. But I don't think this is going to be a deafening blow for Garrett Wilson and completely have him sleeping with the fishes, right? He should be fine with Tyrod, who is locked in as the starter this week because Fields is out. So it's far from a great matchup, but because the Bucs have been good defensively, but on sheer volume alone, Wilson is a mid-range to low-end wide receiver number 2. Now, any non-Garrett Wilson wide receivers are legitimately irrelevant. There's no reason to even spend time talking about them. Now, for the Bucs, just like Justin Fields, Baker literally seemed like he tore everything in his leg. I'm not even kidding. That's what it looked like. He's fucking rolling on the ground. He's sitting there, and then Chauncey walks up to him and starts talking shit, and instantly Baker, like, felt the shit talk coming. He sensed it like he was a force user, and he stood back up and started mean mugging him. Dude, if that was me, I would have been getting escorted off the field into an ambulance on a stretcher. It looked like everything was hurt. The adrenaline was pumping, and he was perfectly fine. Baker's a fucking beast. I'm still so pissed that the Miami Dolphins didn't get Baker, and instead we're stuck with fucking Tua turning the ball over. Absolutely fucking disgusting. I know, Nick, you could have drafted him. The Browns drafted him. Yeah, well, when the Carolina Panthers basically threw him to the curb, when they told him to basically go fuck himself, and then he goes to the Rams, and then the Bucs bring him back, why didn't the Dolphins do that? You know, it's just another case of the Dolphins being absolutely stupid. Now, as an Emeka Egbuka glazer, throughout the summer, he has even exceeded my expectations, outscoring Mike Evans in both games, and he has 3 touchdowns on the season. He has run incredibly hot through the first 2 games and has already cemented himself as a crystal clear, crucial piece inside of this Buccaneers offense. Ranking him outside of the top 24, honestly, would be malpractice at this point in the season. I got him as a mid-range wide receiver 2. Mike Evans has been mid in back-to-back weeks, 10.1 PPR points in week 1 at Atlanta, 10.6 points in week number 2 at the Houston Texans, though he has seen 8 targets and 11 targets, so he's going to be fine, right? No fucking panic alarms here. It isn't like he's magically fallen off a cliff and he's running in slow motion against the DBs. He's not getting open. He's fine. The big game is coming, so you got to just keep rolling Evans out as a mid-range wide receiver 2. Though, if you had both of them and it was like, Nick, I can only start one, I would rather start Emeka Egbuka. Sterling Shepard, the Giants legend, has looked sharp when he has gotten the ball thrown his way this season. But when you're on a team with Egbuka and Evans, your upside is basically in the toilet, not even rosterable. Now we move to game number 8, the halfway point in today's video. Make sure you guys do hit that subscribe button down below. If you are new, whether you are new to the channel or not, make sure you leave a like. We got the Las Vegas Raiders at the Washington Commanders. Now, Jacoby Myers has received 10 plus targets in back-to-back games. Even with Geno Smith playing like you wear sunglasses and needs a cane, Jacoby Myers still has a decent performance up against the Chargers. Jacoby is all reliable weekly. He gets fed targets out the wazoo and is always going to finish anywhere from the wide receiver 3 range to a high-end wide receiver 2. Not a weekly winner by any means, but he helps your team stay afloat. High-end wide receiver 3 for me. I would rank him higher, but this isn't the best matchup for wide receivers so far this season. Trey Tucker is one of those guys where every once in a while he's going to pick up a 4-leaf clover before the game and have a big catch for a touchdown and finishes like the wide receiver 27, though those games are very far and few in between, so no reason to really play Tucker or roster him. Dante Thornton was a guy that I liked in the summer, and I still think that eventually he's going to get his time. He'll become a bigger piece in the offense, but just 1 reception on 4 targets for 20 yards last week. I think he's a skilled player, but as of right now, if you drafted him off of my recommendation as a late round dart throw piece, I'd probably just cut him and maybe get to reel him in later on in the season when he starts to put up numbers. Now, Jaden Stormy Daniels is dealing with a knee injury. From what I have read, if this was a playoff game, he's playing, but it's week 3 up against the Raiders, so he is far from a lock. This is something you ought to follow, as Marcus Mariota is a huge downgrade compared to Jaden Daniels for McLaurin and Debo. Even if Daniels is in a brace and playing, that is much better than Mariota, in my opinion. Debo continues to outscore Terry, so we're at the point where we just need to adjust and have Debo higher in the rankings, which is what we did last week. Now, back-to-back 17-plus point showings in PPR, back-to-back games with a touchdown for Debo. This is a top 5 matchup for wide receivers in terms of points allowed per game to the wide receiver position. So you have to feel good inserting Debo into your lineup as a low-end wide receiver too. If Daniels plays, now he would be bumped down if Marcus Mariota was in the lineup. Terry McLaurin saw a strong uptick in targets and snaps in week 2. 5 receptions on 9 targets up against the Packers for 48 yards. The connection with Jaden Daniels will get better, and Terry will start balling soon. Again, we saw this last year with CD. CD is holding out, and he needs the new contract, so it takes some time for the connection to rekindle. It's the same thing here with the Commanders and Terry and Jaden Daniels. I got him as a high-end wide receiver 3. Now, Noah Brown will get his 3 or 4 targets weekly. You aren't starting a wide receiver, though, that gets 3 to 4 targets a week in week 3 of the fantasy season. Next up, we move to the Atlanta Falcons at the Carolina Panthers. We got a battle of Drake London and Drake London Jr. For Drizzy Drake London, you are firing him up here every single week. On paper, this is not an ideal spot for Drake London, who was definitely not playing his best last week in Minnesota, though it is important to understand that he was coming off an AC joint injury that, based on injury data that I stated last week, wide receivers see a 28% dip in fantasy points in the first game following the injury, and that really isn't too big of an impact after that. The team also was just spamming the run button because the Vikings couldn't stop the run at all. So with him being another week healthier, I feel very good, very nice about London bouncing back. He is Michael Penix's clear wide receiver 1. Don't overthink things. He's a top 12 wide receiver on the week. Darnell, here comes the Mooney. I do think he will become a start-worthy asset, as he did look great at points last season, but ultimately, with him returning from the shoulder injury that he suffered in preseason, last week was his first game back. I need to see better production before I throw him out there. 2 of 4 for 20 yards last week just does not cut it. Ray McLeod's another one of these guys where if the sun lines up in the perfect spot, the fucking moon's aligned, the chakra is aligned, he could randomly have 9 targets and a solid game, but that is about as predictable as Kyle Pitts has been throughout his career, so you definitely don't want to start him. Ted McMillan, Drake London Jr. has looked great in the offense early on in his career. Back-to-back games with 9+ targets, and he looked incredible against the Cardinals last week in Arizona. 6 receptions on 10 targets for 100 yards. If Bryce Young can just figure things out and be a more consistent quarterback, we may be looking at a top 12 season out of McMillan. Coming off a wide receiver 22 finish, I got him as the wide receiver 24-ish range inside of the mid-range. So he's a top 24 guy around, 18, 19, 20 mid-range wide receiver number 2. Now, Hunter Renfro's performance made me feel like I hopped in a fucking time machine back to 2021 on Sunday. 7 receptions on 9 targets for 48 yards and 2 touchdowns as the wide receiver number 8. This absolutely reeks, though, of people run to the waiver wire. Oh my God, I need to pick up Hunter Renfro. Oh my God, I can't wait to start Hunter Renfro. And then he just scores 4 fucking fantasy points. It's a tale as old as time, and I hope that doesn't happen, because I've been a Hunter Renfro enjoyer since his days at Clemson, but let's be honest, this just reeks of that being the scenario. Now, they do need a true wide receiver too, because Leggett just is fucking terrible. Renfro should be able to fill that role, but ultimately in just one game, I would not be yearning to start him. Xavier Leggett, as we just discussed with Renfro, the guy's straight up fucking dog shit. 8 targets and 1 reception last week for -2 yards, and Bryce Young not looking the best doesn't help him out either. Next up, we move to the Houston Texans at the Jacksonville Jaguars in Duval. Houston, we have a problem, and that problem is the offensive line. Nico Collins is getting screwed to the face by the fact that this offensive line is useless. Collins will be wide open. There is not a soul. There's not even a fucking ghost blocking the guy, and he's wide open, and then the ball is, obviously it's snapped, right? He's open, but the problem is CJ Stroud's now been on the ground for a second because 0.5 seconds after the ball is snapped, he is getting fucking plowed like his name was Mia Malkova. I think things will get better, as the line has been terrible for Collins' whole career, and the guy dominated in back-to-back seasons. So I'm not going to panic yet, but I'm certainly just a little bit worried. 3 receptions on 9 targets for 52 yards and a touchdown. Up against the Bucs, tough matchup though. And now he has a much better matchup going up against a defense that allows the 8th most points to wide receivers in fantasy football on a per-game basis. I feel good about a bounce back, and again, you're not sending Nico Collins. You just can't do it. Christian Kirk is expected to return from his hamstring injury in week 3. I expect him to slot in as the wide receiver 2 and think he could become a viable piece in this offense if they figure it out. Big if, though. Big if. Definitely just worthy of a bench stash. For Jaden Higgins, he played 43% of the snaps in both games so far and has 4 targets total for 3 receptions. I like Higgins a ton in terms of like his skill coming out of college. But again, the offense just isn't good enough to even roster him at this point. For the Jaguars, BTJ has been nothing short of a disaster. A big fucking disaster. Though, 2 weeks through the season, he's had 19 targets. That's great. That's amazing. But it's been 5 receptions for 60 yards in 2 cupcake, soft serve, bitch-made easy matchups. So now he faces Derek Stingley, and that's going to be tough sledding for him. Trevor Lawrence and BTJ are just not on the same page. We've said this before. They're not on the same page. They're not in the same chapter. They're not in the same fucking book, okay? One of them's reading Lord of the Rings. The other one's reading Green Eggs and Ham, Red Fish, Blue Fish, Green Fish, whatever the hell that Dr. Seuss book is, okay? I don't think you can give up on him yet. I don't think you can throw in the towel like what Rocky should have probably done for Apollo, but it does feel so bad. It feels terrible. Someone call up Mac Jones and bring him home so that Brian Thomas Jr. can be saved. Travis Hunter's in the wide receiver 4 range, basically on the brink of being a sit. The Jaguars offense has been performing, but it's just everyone except for Hunter and BTJ having a nice fun time out there. It's like that fucking meme of Squidward when he's up in his house and he's looking out the window and SpongeBob and Patrick are having so much fun, right? That's what Travis Hunter and BTJ must feel like, right? He played through his first 2 games, 61% of the offensive snaps and 37% of the defensive snaps. Now, again, I don't want to overreact to a 2-game sample size for a rookie, right? We don't want to full-on panic about rookies. So the upside is definitely still there for Travis Hunter, so you can play him, but honestly, I really just don't feel good at all about this situation. I don't think if you're a Travis Hunter owner, you really feel that good at all, because again, like, we kind of were sold by Liam Cohen. He was going to be playing a lot of offense, 80% of the snaps, but it's just been 61% so far, so that's definitely kind of panic mode, and especially if the defense is like, oh man, you know, we'll put Travis Hunter up against Nico Collins, the guy's going to be absolutely fucking gassed. So Brian Thomas and Travis Hunter are kind of diddling your team, right? And Diami Brown is just 10 inches deep inside the Bengals defense for 5 receptions on 7 targets for 57 yards and a touchdown. Still not rosterable, though, because of T-Law. Next up, we got the Denver Broncos at the LA Superchargers Sunday, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Now, Cortland Sutton looked amazing, fantastic in week number 1, but then he flopped like a fish out of water in week number 2 in a great matchup up against the Colts in Indianapolis. 1 reception on 4 targets for 6 yards. This has been a tough matchup for wide receivers to start off the season, but this is heavily inflated by the fact that Geno Smith was sucking some schlong last week. I think Sutton bounces back as a mid-range wide receiver number 2. Troy, it's Franklin, saw a boost in targets and snaps in week number 2, 8 receptions on 9 targets for 89 yards and a touchdown, as well as 1 carry for 11 yards. The connection with Bo Nix dating all the way back to college at Oregon appears to be great this season. I will, though, pump the brakes a little bit here, as, again, this is a tough matchup, and I do still feel like Sutton is the wide receiver 1. You don't have to sit Franklin by any means, and I get why you might want to start him, but for me, because of the matchup, I would rather just leave him on my bench one more week before we roll him out there. For Marvin Mims, he did score, but his potential huge year appears to be done with the rise of Troy Franklin. Just 36% of the snaps last week. I wouldn't even leave him on my bench at this point. For the Chargers, we just fucking start them all. Roll out the clip, empty the clip, start all the Chargers you got at the wide receiver position, because an offense that we thought was going to be so run-heavy is now just like the most pass-heavy offense in the NFL. Surtain hurt his ankle up against the Colts, something to monitor, as if he isn't fully healthy, that would help out whoever Surtain is going up against, which could end up being Patrick Surtain up against QJ. Ladd McConkey has not been great in terms of fantasy production, but his day will come, and he isn't just irrelevant in this offense. So I'm keeping him as a top 12 start. Don't overthink things. Keenan Allen is a high-end wide receiver 3 at this point, back-to-back top 18 performances out of the UNC with a touchdown in each game. This matchup isn't great, though, and eventually Ladd's going to have that big game. Either way, though, for most people, you're still rocking with Keenan. Now, Quentin Johnston can't keep getting away with this. How does this man score at least one touchdown in back-to-back games as a top 24 wide receiver? With how pass-heavy the offense is compared to how heavily I thought they were going to run the ball, like most people probably thought, Quentin Johnston is worthy of a wide receiver 4 dart throw shot, as he has paid dividends in back-to-back weeks. Next up, we got game number 12, the New Orleans Saints at the Seattle Seahawks. Now, Olave has been getting force-fed the rock on a weekly basis for the Saints offense, 10-plus targets in both games. The production, though, hasn't been the best since the offense as a whole really isn't that good. But hey, I would be fine rolling the dice here on him as a low-end wide receiver 3, strictly because, again, he sees so much volume. This is the most difficult matchup, though, for wide receivers to start off the season, so I wouldn't be surprised if he was kind of mid, but I think you just kind of have to have him ranked as a top 36 guy because he's just done it so consistently to start off the season. And obviously, though, there's always that nervousness with Chris Olave. Like, anytime he gets hit or anytime the ball is thrown towards him, like a hospital ball from Spencer Rattler, you're just shitting yourself because of Olave's past. But I hope he can stay healthy. He's a low-end wide receiver number 3. I'm Rashid Shaheed, just like Olave, has been pretty reliable to start off the season, but this matchup scares me too heavily to warrant starting both of them, so I'll just lean with Olave because he's clearly the number 1 on the team. I still actually cannot believe that Brandon Cooks is still in the NFL and he actually still looks decent. With that said, though, you're not catching me playing the wide receiver 3 on a Spencer Rattler offense. Jackson Smith-Njigba is essentially like taking a condom and wrapping it around your wide receiver position. Back-to-back weeks inside the top 13 with 18-plus PPR points in both games. Last week in Pittsburgh, he was the wide receiver 13, 8 receptions on 10 targets for 103 yards. Even if the touchdown upside is limited for Jackson Smith-Njigba, which has been the case over his whole entire career at this point, he is a safety net for Sam Darnold and will be seeing more than likely 10-plus targets every single week. The matchup here isn't the best, as the Saints allow the 22nd most amount of points on a per-game basis to wide receivers, but ultimately, with such a safe floor of targets, JSN should be ranked weekly as a top 12 option. I got him as a low-end wide receiver 1 on the week. Now, seeing Cooper Kupp play well last week did make me happy. I have been a Cooper Kupp guy since he got drafted. A clear uptick in targets from week 1 to week number 2, tripling his target number from 3 to 9, having 7 receptions for 90 yards in Pittsburgh. Though this is a tough matchup, and I don't trust Kupp or Sam Darnold enough to play Cooper Kupp here. Torrey Horton, here's a who, found the end zone last week on his 2 receptions for 4 targets for 32 yards. I think Horton could play a factor if Kupp falls off the face of the earth again, but as of right now, he shouldn't even be rostered, even though, again, I do like his upside going down the future, maybe a year or 2 down the line. Next up, we got the Dallas Cowboys at the Chicago Bears. CeeDee Lamb looked great up against the Giants after a performance where he couldn't catch up against the Eagles in Philly. 9 receptions on 11 targets for 112 yards. The Bears defense allows the second most points to wide receivers on a weekly basis, so this matchup is prime for a Lamb big game, especially with Jalen Johnson out indefinitely. You have to feel great about Lamb here, just like you do every single week as a top 5 wide receiver. I got him as my wide receiver 1 on the week. George Pickens looked great in week number 2. Looked like the guy I expected to get when I was drafting him in my drafts. 5 of 9 for 68 yards and a touchdown. This game has the second highest projected point total on the week, and I expect this to be a shootout, much like last week's game up against Mr. Unlimited and the Giants. Pickens is still risky, and I don't think I will ever feel 100% safe about him, but this game environment should be able to lead him finishing at least as a high-end wide receiver number 3. Turpin went 4 for 4 like he was at Wendy's for 47 yards and a touchdown, which isn't remotely surprising. He is a big speed guy, but the usage in this offense is nowhere near enough for you to start him. In honor of Aqib Talib, Rome Odunze snatched DJ Moore's chain. I ain't gonna get tried by a sorry-ass receiver like Michael Crabtree. Shout out to... Richard Sherman. He's the one who said that. Aqib Talib also stole Michael Crabtree's chain. Rome Odunze took DJ Moore's. He's the number one prostitute in all of Kazakhstan, number one receiver in all of Chicago. Very nice. 7 receptions on 11 targets in Detroit for 128 yards, and not 1, but 2 touchdowns as the wide receiver for 3 total touchdowns through his first 2 games. And even with the Bears being a laughingstock, Rome keeps balling. Like I said in the offseason, Rome wasn't built in a day. This is his 2nd season. He's going to play better. Ben Johnson was oogling and ogling over him all summer long. We should have read the tea leaves. You should have read the tea leaves, man. It's looking great. I feel great about him this week up against a defense that just got plowed, destroyed by Malik Neighbors and Wan'Dale Robinson. He is a high-end wide receiver too. DJ Moore has had his job taken by Rome Odunze. 5 receptions on 6 targets last week with 46 receiving yards. In a game that the Bears got their back blown out in Detroit, this game feels fine for Moore because it will be higher scoring, but he's no longer like, you know, you kind of just set it and forget it, top 28-ish guy. He's now just a low-end wide receiver 3. Zacchaeus is kind of just taking the ball away from Burden, and that's really all that he does. It's just keeping Luther Burden off the field. Next up, we got the Cardinals at the San Francisco 49ers. Now, the first 2 games of this season have perfectly encapsulated the Marvin Harrison Jr. experience from last season. Super high highs and the lowest of lows. This may be yet another season of a roller coaster ride, Six Flags style for Marvin Harrison Jr., though it is important to note that they didn't need to throw the ball a ton up against the Panthers because they were coasting to victory for a majority of the game. So we should see a stronger bounce back out of Harrison. I am nervous because, again, this is feeling like last year. It's eerily similar. I got that deja vu Post Malone and Justin Bieber song. I'm nervous. I am a little bit nervous, but you don't bench an early round pick who has already flashed once to start off the season in a middle of the road matchup up against the Niners. I got him as a mid-range wide receiver too. Michael Wilson found the end zone last week on 1 of his 2 targets. He is the clear number 2 receiver on his team in terms of snap share, but with MHJ and Trey McBride taking away so much of the target share, no need to ever play him. Zay Jones, just 1 target through 3 weeks. The wide receiver 3 in snaps, but again, not rosterable. For the 49ers, Ricky Rolex was dethroned by Juwan Jennings last week and had a pretty forgettable performance. 4 of 6 for 56 yards. Once Brock Purdy comes back, I will feel a lot better about Ricky, but in a positive matchup, he is still definitely startable. I do expect him to play a bigger role this week. The team is just dealing with so many injuries that things just kind of have to go better for him. I got him as a low-end wide receiver 3. Juwan Jennings was the favorite target of Mac Jones last week in New Orleans. 5 receptions on 10 targets for 89 yards and a tug. He is somehow hurt again, though, because the guy just can't catch a break. He's dealing with the ankle injury. And going into last week, we didn't even know if he would play. It was a game-time decision with the shoulder injury, and that he played. So with Mac Attack under center, McCorkle Jones, he feels like a low-end wide receiver 3 in a good matchup here. Kendrick Bourne was the wide receiver 3 last week on the team. You aren't starting Mac Jones as wide receiver 3 in 2025. Now we move to the penultimate game because you waited all day for Sunday night. The Kansas City Chiefs at the New York Football Giants. The Giants are a wet dream matchup for wide receivers so far this season, allowing the most amount of points to wide receivers on a weekly basis. Worthy is expected to play in this matchup, but according to Ian Rappaport, he will be playing with a fully torn labrum and a harness. Can he have a big game with the injury? Of course, but I find that significantly less likely to happen, so I would not want to start him in his first game back, even if this is a good matchup. So I would not play him. Hollywood went from 16 targets in week 1 to just 5 last week. Since the matchup is better, I am fine starting him, but he's far from a lock top 24 guy. He's a low-end wide receiver 3 to high-end wide receiver 4. Again, the Xavier Worthy situation is something to monitor, meaning if it comes out that, hey, maybe he won't have the hardest on, hey, maybe he's healthier than I thought, then maybe we want to play him. But based on the news right now on Wednesday, I don't feel good about it. Tyquan caught a 49-yard touchdown in the fourth quarter that was able to push him up to being the wide receiver 31, but with him seeing just 2 receptions on 5 targets for 59 yards, and Mahomes basically just heaving it up to him, hoping he would burn a DB, the fuck it Tyreek Hill out there somewhere, fuck it Tyquan Thornton out there somewhere. I don't think he's startable. I think Worthy can become very useful in fantasy as he is the best wide receiver on his team until Rice returns, but with him having a fully torn labrum and with him playing with the harness, I just don't feel good about starting him. I would rather him, as of right now, have a good game on my bench than starting him and him being like a fucking decoy out there. Now, for the Giants, Malik Neighbors is a must-start wide receiver every single week so far this season. The matchup up against the Chiefs has been very good for the wide receiver position, with them allowing the 9th most points to wide receivers on a per-game basis this season. Neighbors just went nuclear against the Cowboys in Dallas, scoring 37.7 PPR points as the wide receiver number 2, 9 receptions on 13 targets for 167 yards and 2 touchdowns. While ultimately, I don't think the offense as a whole will ever look that good again, with Neighbors getting 12 or more targets in back-to-back games. Even if the offense doesn't look as good, he should be a reliable asset for you weekly in a solid matchup here. I got him in the top 3. Last week, I basically spent 2 whole minutes on the wide receiver start sit video and on my live stream shitting on Wan'Dale Robinson. Basically, I gave him the bulletin board material that he needed to drop his nuts in the Cowboys defense's mouth. If he watched that clip, which he obviously didn't, because why the fuck would he be watching a fantasy football video? I motivated him, though. I'll take my credit for that. 8 receptions on 10 targets for 142 yards and a touchdown. Frankly, I never thought I would even see this kind of a game from him. This easily could be a one-off showing where he has that big game, he sees all those targets, but he's just reliable. 10 to 12 points every week, so I'm willing to roll him out there. Desperate start kind of play, though, in my opinion. But at least now we've seen the vision. That's so Raven. We've seen it, and there is actually upside with Wan'Dale, which, again, I never really believed in. Darius Slayton plays so many snaps on this team and is useless for fantasy. He has just 4 targets on the season, and now that I say that, you know, we shout on Wan'Dale last week. Now Darius Slayton is going to get like a 60-yard bomb thrown from Russell Wilson and score a big touchdown, and everyone will laugh at me. Next up, we got the final game here, Monday Night Football. Dun, 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 dun. The Detroit Lions at the Baltimore Ravens. After the sports media kind of declared that the Lions might be frauds, Paul Revere style, the British are coming, the Lions answered the call in week number 2, and Amon-Ra St. Brown reminded us why he's one of the most consistent wide receivers in fantasy football. 9 receptions on 11 targets for 115 yards, and not 1, not 2, but 3 touchdowns as the wide receiver 1, scoring near 40 fantasy points. This is the highest scoring projected game on the week, and with the shootout that already occurred in week 1 with the Bills and the Ravens, you got to feel good about Amon-Ra St. Brown here as a top 5 wide receiver. Jameson Williams blasted off into space like his name was Jimmy Neutron last week with 2 receptions on 4 targets for 108 yards and a touchdown. Ultimately, based on the first 2 weeks of the season, Jameson Williams appears to be very boom or bust like he was for a majority of his career outside of last season. I am hopeful that he gets more involved, he gets more targets, and I love this matchup a ton, but the risk is right in front of your face, so I got him as a high-end wide receiver number 3. Isaac Tesla did see his snaps increase, which is what Dan Campbell told us would happen following his touchdown in week 1, which is solid for him if you drafted him in best ball, but in a redraft league with J-Mo and Amon-Ra healthy, Tesla will never see enough of targets, snaps to justify anyone even rostering him. For the Baltimore Ravens, Lamar and Zay Flowers might be eating breakfast together like Cooper Kupp and Matthew Stafford did a few years ago when Kupp exploded, because Flowers is getting fed game in and game out. After years of me being a Zay Flowers truther, I turn my back on him. I say, you know what? I'm done with Zay Flowers. He can't get the touchdowns. Not seeing a crazy amount of targets. The offense runs too much. I'm done. Finito. Then he decides to do this. So it's my fault for turning my back on him. 7 receptions on 11 targets for 74 yards. And in week 1, he went crazy as the wide receiver 1 in Buffalo. The Lions allowed the 7th most points to wide receivers. Roma Dunze played well against them last week. Flowers is running hot. You got to jump on the bandwagon and start him as a top 12 option. For Rashad Bateman, if you are holding on to him on your bench at this point in the season, he is droppable, and he's had fewer than 4 points in back-to-back games. We saw an uptick in snaps for Tylan Wallace last week, and Bateman's snaps dropped from 73% week 1 to 59%. I still think Bateman is a skilled player, but his usage is not enough for you to quantify keeping him burning a hole on your bench. DeAndre Hopkins will play anywhere from 20 to 40-ish% of the snaps in any given game. He has scored in both matchups and is a solid red zone threat for the team. Ultimately, though, you can't start a guy in fantasy who plays sub 35% of the snaps in both games and gets 2 targets a week. It is a touchdown or bust season for Hopkins, and that hot streak is going to come to a close soon. Pretty soon, and honestly, I think it'll probably be in this game. So thank you guys all so much for watching. If you did end up enjoying, make sure you guys hit that subscribe button down below, like it owes you some money. Leave a like on today's video, it would help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter or X, please do so at NotoriousFantasy. Check out one of the videos on the screen if you haven't seen it already. Check out Underdog, link in the video description. Love you long time. Hope you have a great one, and as always, good boy!